how's it going? My name is Lauren May and welcome to this video. Today I'll be sharing with you how I made stuffed sewn Christmas baubles. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and let me know in the comments down below if you are going to make something like this. If you're not already, please subscribe. The button is just down below. The link for the pattern of this DIY is in the description below. I've gotten it off of a website and just adjusted it to how I like it from there. Now, this video is a DIY with me, which means that I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm just fumbling my way through it, but I love DIYs, and so I thought I'd bring you along. If you would make a different decision, then definitely do that. If you've seen that I've made a mistake, please do it the correct way. I am just learning as I go. So with this pattern is for actually cushion size baubles, which are absolutely adorable, and I've actually made one and I'm planning to make another one as a cushion for our living room for Christmas. So you can definitely use that for that, because that's its intended purpose anyway. But what I've done, I shrank the pattern down to an A5 size piece of paper, and so the baubles will actually be bauble size, which is really cute, and I thought this would be a fun little DIY I could give people as gifts to put on their Christmas tree. So if you want to hang around and see how I did it, then stick around and follow along. I went to Spotlight and I picked out some adorable Christmas patterns and fabric, including a silver fabric, which is used for the top of the bauble. Now, I do highly recommend getting a lining fabric for this because mine was very fragile and it would fall apart very easily. If you find a silver fabric that is a lot more has a lot more structural integrity, then definitely you could probably just use one layer, but I had to use two or else it would be very, very hard to keep together. So just keep that in mind. I cut out all of the pattern pieces as needed. I made sure for this one I was alternating between green and the Christmas pattern. I have done others where I've done all 6 panels were different patterns. I've done ones where there are, you know, Christmas patterns and not a plain one. You can do whatever combination you think looks great. For the purpose of this video, I'm doing my green one where it's green and my red Christmas pattern, and I think it looks adorable. So yeah, it's up to you. You can make all sorts. I have made I think 7 so far, but again, for the purpose of this video, this is just how I made one. So let's get straight into it. I am tracing around the pattern piece and cutting it out on a folded bit of fabric so that when you open it up you have the full pattern ready to go. I did this a couple of times, 3 to be specific, so that there was 3 of the red and 3 of the green pattern fabric, and yeah, this is what this looks like. I had to move around the material a bit more because I had made a couple of other things with this material and wanted to make sure it all fit perfectly. It might have been easier for me to trace around this pattern piece if I had pinned it to the material, but it worked okay for the small amount of times that I was doing it. I was also using a piece of chalk to trace so that it would come out later on, but very vibrant over the red of the pattern, because in a other try I used this red pencil on the other side and it didn't see. But as you can see here, I am tracing on the non-correct side around where the actual pattern piece is, and this is because I deliberately cut bigger than the pattern so that there would be a seam allowance, but when I am sewing I want to see and sew along the actual pattern size. So this is me tracing that on all of those pieces so that I know where to sew. Now I've cut out all 6 pieces, 3 green and 3 red. I'm able to sew them now, so I'm putting them right sides together, a pattern of red then green, and then I'll be sewing along the red line that I just drew on one of those sides, and I think I'm following the red side here and then just sewing along. I believe I did a straight stitch and I'm using red thread. As per the instructions, I'm only sewing down one half of these two together. As you see, as I open up, there's only one side that is sewn, and then as I open it to right sides, I put the new piece on right sides together on the end of the other side of the red piece, if that makes sense. You can see it here in the video. I pin it together and then I'm able to sew it together. Now that there are 3 panels sewn together, the instructions tell us to do the next 3 separate of this half. So we're doing 2 halves done separately. So we're grabbing another red piece and a green piece, right sides together, pinning it together and sewing down one half. Now for the pattern to actually work, one half will go green, red, green, and the other half will go red, green, red. So just make sure that you are aware of those sorts of patterns as you are sewing together. Now that the 2 halves have been completed separately, all we have to do is sew them together. Now that would be by putting them together, right sides together, and so that the seams are all aligned. Where the top is, all of those seams have to be together where all the points end on both of the halves, and then just pin it so that you can sew it, and making sure that when you do sew it, you leave a little gap so that you can flip it inside out. Now that both sides are sewn together, you can use that little gap that you left to flip it right side out. And then you can stuff it. Now you are going to need a lot more stuffing for each bauble than you think. I kept on adding and adding. The first one I ever made was very depleted, and so I decided to keep on adding until they were really, puffed out as much as they can be. I had to buy a big container full of stuffing because I was making so many, and I was making some pillows as well. But if you are just making a couple of these baubles, I don't think you need any more than a 500-gram packet. Now that the bowl is filled with stuffing, you can sew that hole closed. I did it with hand stitching because I think that would be the best way to ensure that it looks as good as it can be. So I just got a little bit of red thread and I tied the knot at the bottom of the thread, and then with the seam allowance tucked in on both sides of the 2 parts of the hole, I made sure that the thread only went into one side of the seam allowance and then across the hole into the other side of the seam allowance. I'm not sure if I'm explaining that well enough, but hopefully you can see how I did it with the video. Then to finish off, I made sure that the connection point of all 6 of the baubles was quite secure, and yeah, just gave it a little bit more stability and also tied it off. And the way that I tied off is I put my needle in and back out again, and then wrap the thread around a couple times, and then as I'm pulling through, it creates a knot. So I did that a couple of times in a few different places. It doesn't necessarily matter about tidiness, because at this point in particular is where we're going to put the little silver bauble thing. So that's why I decided to choose the most messiest one to make sure that's where that hole went. I'm measuring out the pattern pieces for the silver top of the bauble, and that comes with the pattern pieces in the description below as well. And I'm also making sure that there is some seam allowance when I cut it out, but I am drawing specifically around the pattern piece, and then I'll eyeball the seam allowance. As I mentioned earlier, my silver material is actually quite fragile, so I've had to use a lining as well. So I'm just tracing around the pattern piece on both the lining and the silver piece. Right sides together, I've taken each piece of each shape together, and we are sewing around all around the edges except for a small hole where you can then flip it inside out. So here I'm doing the long rectangular shape, and then I'll do the circle in just a moment, and the same thing, leaving a small hole so that you can flip it back right side out. Here I am delicately trying to flip it out right sides out. As I said, the silver fabric is very fragile, so if I pull too much on that side, it starts to unravel. So I have to only pull the lining side as much as I can, and then I use this pencil to kind of even out all of those edges as much as I can, and I do that on the rectangle shape as well. For the hanging part of the bauble, I found this braided silver cord that I thought was absolutely perfect. So here I'm just measuring it out. I did reference another one I had made, but you can kind of just eyeball it or kind of see how big the circle is and do like a dome over and kind of do it that way. But I'm sticky taping it because the braid unravels as soon as you cut it, so I wanted to make sure that it didn't do that as I tried to sew it. So I put tape in the ends, but again it depends on what kind of rope or special cord that you're using. And I'm measuring out halfway on both the rectangle and the circle so that I know where to put the cord when I'm sewing around. And here I put them right sides together, silver against silver, and obviously because rectangles and circles are not the same shape, this is a very fiddly task, and you're going to have to maneuver the material like every couple of stitches, so please be aware of that. And also, if your silver material is anything like mine, it's very slippery, so you don't want to move it around too much much, so it's all very like attention grabbing, and you're going to need to keep your eye on all of it all at the same time. And then when you get to halfway, you kind of stop and you put your little cord bit in, but make sure that most of it goes to the left of you, so the in between the right sides. And then as you sew over it a couple of times and then get further around the circle on the other half, you put the other end in as well. Once you have finished that part, you can flip it back through right side out to see what might need fixing up. I had to fix over a stitch because there was a giant hole. You might have to do that, but remember to flip it back wrong sides out. Then the last thing to do is sew the two ends of the rectangle together at the end of the circle, if that makes sense. So you are kind of closing that gap so that it can be the top of the bauble. What you're left with is a cylindrical shape with a little bit of a handle, and you'll then be sewing that on top of your ball. So I am just starting my stitch out here and then trying to maneuver where I want the top of the silver bit to go. I did eventually use pins to help secure it, but if you're really good, you might not need pins, but it's definitely helpful. And then as you go around, take the pins out. Because this is such a small space, you'll have to be quite careful on not poking yourself with the pins as you go around. And the way that I sewed it together is I started from underneath and I went through the bauble and then into the silver bit and then back down, but then I went back. So I was kind of back stitching. I don't know what that stitch is called. It's like where you go over half the stitch that you've just done and then go forward. Yeah, I really don't know what that's called, but I know it's a type of stitch that I've learned at some stage, and it just, I think, gave it a little bit more security. I'm making sure I'm going through both layers of the lining and the silver bit to make sure it's super secure, and making sure I'm going down into the bauble, obviously because you're trying to attach it to those things. Eyeballing it is fine as long as you're covering the intersection where all 6 parts of the bauble interact, then it will be fine. Mine was kind of a little bit off center, but this is all made with love, handmade, and so I feel like people are going to be quite gracious with, you know, accepting some slight faults in a gift. And obviously this isn't even a perfect circle, so it looks more like an apple anyway, so I feel like people are a lot forgiving in handmade gifts. And then when you've done like 80% around the circle, you stuff it with a little bit of stuffing and then sew up that hole, and then you're pretty much done. Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a big thumbs up and let me know in the comments down below if you would make this DIY. There is a playlist on my channel called DIY with me where you can see all of the DIYs that I've done over the years, and I've done a lot. Some of them have been fails and some of them have been quite good successes, so you can check them out and see which ones you like. If you're not already, please subscribe. The button is down below. I'm glad that you have chosen to stick around and watch this video, and I'm very appreciative of those who continue to show up. I hope you have a Merry Christmas and you get to bless some of your loved ones with a gift like this. And remember, don't forget to hug someone today. Bye.